So this is Next Level Human, episode 1. This is the first episode. Consciousness is currency. Okay, so we're gonna talk about money. What is real currency? I know we've been taught that, yeah, it's money. It's what you can see in your bank account in terms of digits, what you can buy food with, what you can pay your mortgage with, pay your rent. But I'm going to challenge that. Okay. So I'm going to challenge that. And what I first like to say is, what if I told you that high net worth individuals are already hiring telepaths, mediums, remote viewers to get high dollar return on investment on non-human intelligence? While maybe you, but definitely most of the world, is still debating whether psychic abilities even exist, right? The truth is, consciousness is the most valuable resource on the planet and most likely the universe. And if you don't start tapping into yours, you're going to find yourself lost in the fray of this coming new world. So, welcome to Next Level Human, where we explore the biggest paradigm shifts in our consciousness. We're going to talk about disclosure and the emergence of the natural human. How does that happen? And are you part of it, or are you going to get lost in it? I'm Paula Davis. I am a political scientist. I am a medium, a futurist, and a guide in this transformation. And if you feel like something massive is shifting right now, but you can't quite put your finger on it, then you are definitely in the right place. Let's dive in. So, I want to tell you a little bit about my personal story. Now, in 2012, I was living what most would say was pretty much a prosaic life. Maybe somebody would think it's a perfect life. I don't know. But I was a wife, a mother of 3 active boys. I had 2 dogs. I had 2 cars. I had a large house to manage. It was in the suburbs of Texas, right? And on the outside, everything looked pretty normal, stable, right? But internally, I felt something was off, right? One night in April of that year, 2012, my entire perception of reality completely was shattered. That night, after putting my boys to bed, I stood at my kitchen sink doing dishes. And, it was at this time I was reflecting on my past. I looked back to 1992, around the time that I was in college, ready to graduate. And I was actually graduating in a political science degree. And it was a really exciting time. The Cold War was ending, apartheid was collapsing. And for the first time, we had emerging technologies, ones that I was using in my classes, that would revolutionize how we would govern. I believe deeply that we, the people, could use data-driven models to make really great policies that would truly benefit humanity. I really believed it. We were on the precipice of an amazing time in humanity. But by 2012, as I stood at my kitchen sink, I was like, I had the opposite feeling. I'm like, oh my gosh, 20 years have passed and we're actually declining as a civilization in the things that matter the most. Instead of progressing, we were declining. Depression was up, anxiety was up, diseases of despair like heart disease, diabetes, substance abuse. At this time on the East Coast, there was just a rapid decay of people on, I believe it was heroin and methamphetamines were destroying entire families. It was crazy, right? And the worst part of it was the people that had the most feelings of hopelessness were our youth. I was a teacher at the time. I was a long-term substitute and I worked in 2 different schools. And the kids there would divulge to me their intense depression, and the ideation of suicide. And suicide had been up, and attempts had skyrocketed over the 20 years. And in the frustration of this, and me raising my own 3 boys and concerned about their future, I was like, I looked up to the sky and I said, what the hell is going on? And in that moment, something special happened. A voice, male's voice. It was deep, it was clear, it was unmistakable, and it spoke to me out of nowhere. And what it told me was, because of course I'm looking outside of the world, the whole problem's on the outside. It said to me, if you don't stop what you're doing, you won't get that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I was shocked. I whipped my head around to try to see, who was in the room with me. But before I could even process what was going on, my entire body expanded. I felt enormous. And the earth itself, which was just a small sphere within my hands, I became enormous. The earth was a tiny little ball between my hands, and it shifted back. And then before you know it, I was right back at my kitchen sink. I was shocked. I thought I'd had a stroke. But in all honesty, I felt incredible. I felt lighter. I felt untethered. And I went to bed that night. I slept wonderfully. And the next morning, as I started to open my eyes, I was still laying in bed, and a complete poem downloaded in my mind. And it was imprinted on my brain because I could literally get up, get a piece of paper, and completely write it all down like a computer, just fast like that. And there it was. But I'll be honest with you, the deep meaning of the poem, I was completely confused. It made no sense to me at the time. It talked about fairies, and it talked about guilt, talked about shame, fear, coming into oneself. It just was like nonsense. I didn't know anything about any of coming into yourself. And in truth, at the time, the words made no sense, but years later, now I understand it completely. Because in the 10 years that followed, from 2012 to 2022, I had to grow into the information of the poem through research, study, personal development. To say that I put in 10,000 hours would be an understatement beyond what you could even imagine. I had to grow into the information of a poem that was given to me in seconds, but made no sense to me. It was the catalyst to get me moving on to finding out what I was doing to keeping myself from the pot of gold that was at this rainbow. Okay, so let's fast forward. Fast forward to 2022. At this point, I am a daily meditator. At this point, I had come into this concept, I can do mediumship. I can connect with people's souls on a psychic, telepathic way. I can connect in with peoples that have passed to the spirit world in a very telepathic, psychic way. It was an amazing skill, and I used it to help people. It was wonderful. This was the product of me developing myself, me developing my natural human abilities came through developing myself. And through it, I was able to connect with people in a very special way. So, mind you, in 2022, I've evolved, I've developed my change. My life had changed completely from being in the suburbs of Austin, Texas in 2012. But in June of 2022, I was in meditation. It was actually on my birthday, on June 19th. when that same man's voice spoke to me yet again. And he said something very profound and unusual, because at this point, I had evolved myself personally. I had evolved myself where I could um, do psychic work, I could do mediumship work, I could receive telepathic messages. But one thing I wasn't interested in was UFOs. So what does he come to tell me about? UFOs. He said that within the next couple years, short from 2022, that sincere UFO disclosure would begin. And over the next few years, the revelations would compound beyond imagination. And he spoke of a civilization that lived within the earth. They lived in a city named Talos, and it was beneath Mount Shasta in California. Then he directed me to material that I could read to help understand their existence. And then he said, I'm asking you to write a book with us. And so again, my life is completely tipped upside down 10 years after, where suddenly I'm engaged in inside information, futuristic happenings that are going to be occurring about UFOs, and taking me to the next level of human development, which is the realization that there's civilizations that live in inner Earth. And in truth, I did follow suit. On June 19th, I started writing the book. I woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning and I got to work on it. But on the day that I finished the final chapter of the book, chapter 12, tragedy struck my family in a very mysterious and curious way. And in a mysterious way, my health took a rapid decline. And in truth, recovery has been very slow. It has taken 2 years to recover from the blow to my physical health and to overcome the grief of the death in my family that occurred on the same day, the day I was starting to write the final chapter of the book. And if you think that that's coincidence, then you would not understand the personal development I'm talking about. You wouldn't understand mediumship. You wouldn't understand telepathic abilities, and you wouldn't understand psychicism. There are no coincidences in the world, and there's nothing random. And that's one of the lessons to learn as we move into being the next level human. But now that that time has passed and I've grown yet again through the crisis, I can tell you this. Everything that they said would happen is happening now. And this is why I'm starting this podcast right now. Right now is the perfect time. I couldn't have done it any sooner, and I can't do it any later. This is the time, because what has happened is exactly what my book said would happen, what this man's voice would say. What happened, I released my book in January of 2023 in the ebook form. And then the physical book form, I released it in March of 2023. What happened in July of 2023? Congressional testimonies by David Grush revealed that there has been a secret legacy program where there have been corporate and governmental entities in a very deep state fashion that have been working on non-human craft since the 1930s. And more than that, they have not only developed retrieved non-human intelligence craft, they have reverse engineered it, they have learned how to man it themselves, and they have retrieved non-human biologics for their own investigation. So this information revealed in 2023, July of 2023, was 6 months after my book was released. And then again, in November of 2024, Luis Elizondo and 2 other members testified in front of Congress, speaking of things of the same nature. Of course, you can go back to those congressional hearings with David Grush and Luis Elizondo for your own listening pleasure and viewing. But it proves that the information that I said that was told to me in 2022 would happen is happening. Now, most recently, and I would say the most stunning information in terms of disclosure, is an interview that had occurred on January 23rd, 2025. So today is February 22nd, 2025. This is 1 month prior. Again, confirming what I was told 2 years ago. But here's the thing, what's being revealed is only scratching the surface. Because I don't just speak from the perspective of what's happening on Earth in terms of what you can hear in congressional disclosures, or maybe what military personnel are saying, or what this interview with Jake Barber on January 23rd is saying. I come from the perspective of the information that's coming to me through tapping into a greater reality. I'm speaking from the next level human that connects in with beings from inner earth, the one that exists both on the surface and within this planet, but it is not being acknowledged, and their voices are not being heard, except now as I'm speaking to you. So let's look at this. What's happening with the Jake Barber situation, the big revelation. In a groundbreaking interview on January 2025 with investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, Jake Barber, a former military officer and successful entrepreneur, shattered the veil of secrecy surrounding something called psionics. Barber, who served with distinction in the military before transitioning into the private sector as a defense contractor, revealed that humanity has been engaging with telepathic technology and piloting craft via consciousness for years. And this would confirm the congressional hearings from July of 2023 by David Grush, where he stated that there's a legacy program that's been operating for decades. He says from the 1930s on reverse engineering craft. Part of piloting this craft, again, is with telepathic abilities. I say this because in 2012, this man's voice that spoke to me, he was telling me, if I don't start changing who I am and evolving myself, I'm going to miss out on the pot of gold that's coming for humanity. And this is confirming all of this. So Jake Barber's personal experience with the craft, and this is important, and he calls it an egg-shaped craft that he came in contact with. Now, he came in contact with many exotic craft, but he points to his experience with this particular egg craft because it wasn't just technological interaction he had with it, it was an emotional interaction. The moment he connected with the craft telepathically, he felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity. It was like the technology was designed for human interaction. He described it as a living entity responding to his thoughts. The sheer power of this revelation drove Barber to commit himself to full disclosure within 12 months. And he insists the world must know the truth, that humanity is not only interacting with these craft, but actively flying them through psionics. Okay, So that's one thing. That's a lot to take in. So let's take a breath. If you hadn't had that information before, let's absorb that. Your paradigm is shifting. And even if you hear it with your ears, you haven't digested it into your reality yet. So let's just take a moment to take a breath and allow that in before I go to the next thing. And the next thing is talking a little bit about Ross Coulthart. Who is he? Well, he's an investigative journalist. He works with News Nation, possibly other entities as well. I'm not sure. He has a background of award-winning investigative journalist work. And most recently, he's worked on military intelligence, national security, and UFO disclosure. So he's been instrumental in bringing a lot of really good information forward of recent. And one thing that he reviewed in his own independent Q&A session in January of 2025 is he divulged that he had attended an elite gathering where high net worth individuals held an extravagant party out in the remote places of who knows where, complete with fine dining, dancing, even hot tubbing. But what made this party super extraordinary wasn't the decadence of it, or even the high net worth names that were there, but rather the entertainment, where they hired telepaths to summon craft and orbs for the guests' pleasure. And these individuals who hold significant power and influence know about psionics and the ability to summon and pilot craft through telepathic means. And they're putting their venture money into it, finding out the profit. Yet, instead of bringing this reality to the public, they've hoarded the technology for their own benefit. At the expense of secrecy, they alone profit from humanity's hidden potential, your ability to do this with a little bit of help. While the rest of the world is left in the dark, still scared to say, I think UFOs exist among their friends and family, right? So even if they do reveal it to the rest of the world, which they will, they do it on their own terms and in their own way, and they decide what they will extract from it before making it public. They're going to control the narrative of the most important thing in the universe. But here's what's interesting in all of this. Again, I come to you with the message that I got in 2022, and that is the fact that you and them are actually being highly monitored, right? Because when you're talking about telepathic abilities, you're talking about nothing is hidden from anybody anymore. The people from Inner Earth can tap into anybody anywhere. They have that higher level of intelligence that not only they have, but it's our birthright as well. They know what's going to happen long before it happens. So in 2022, the Inner Earth beings told me that this would occur. They told me before the people hiding it knew they were going to hide it. And they told me it was going to happen before they knew they were going to disclose it and how they were going to disclose it. So what power have I been tapping into that's able to do that? And why? Because you know what? The next level human doesn't depend on the behavior of others. They will know what to do based on their own internal compass and their own personal goals. And if life is a game, then this is a very interesting game to play. Now, I want to share something more with you, and this goes into my book a little bit more. It's a little bit about the fun these higher level intelligence beings are having with me in writing this book and with you in their ability to see what's going to happen before it happens. And it has to do with foreshadowing. And it has to do with foreshadowing of a woman named Maria Orsic. And it goes back to Jake Barber, who's been revealing this information now in 2025, and a woman named Maria Orsic. So in my book, I wrote from the information in 2022, I wrote about a woman named Maria Orsic. She was a telepathic medium who, in 1919, right, we're talking more than 100 years ago, received a telepathic transmission from extraterrestrial sources, specifically from Aldebaran. These transmissions contained blueprints for an advanced craft powered by the electromagnetic energy of the field and piloted through none other than her consciousness. Now, in that transmission, she was also given humanity's origin stories, right? Now, here's what's interesting. The secrecy surrounding Maria Orsic's work now makes even more sense. So when I wrote that in 2022, it sounded crazy. What? There's this woman 100 years ago, received instructions on craft, how to build it, and then how to fly it with her mind. But with Barber now confirming that psionics has been deliberately suppressed since the 1930s, and Grush backing that up, the fate of Orsic's occultic financiers, which were people that helped her build the craft back then, becomes even more compelling. Because according to my research, and confirmed with the beings that were speaking to me in 2022, Orsic and a group of high net worth individuals built the craft based on the received designs. And just before the detonation of the atomic bomb, they used the craft to leave, to vanish, presumably leaving Earth behind and all the devastation. Why? Well, just because I wrote in 2022, the universe knows what will happen long before it happens. And those who align with the universe will profit from it, while those who don't will pay the price. The detonation of the atomic bomb was not just a historical milestone for humanity's destruction and fear. It was a rupture in humanity's timeline. Those who had access to higher knowledge prepared for what was coming, while the rest of us were left behind to deal with the consequences. Consequences we're still dealing with. And what's interesting is I was able to do this. I did this in 2003. So in 2003, before I had any idea that telepathic abilities existed or any of this existed, right? I am an agnostic. In 2003, I was given insight that an economic crash was coming in 2008. And because of this, and I trusted it, I was able to prepare and take advantage of the downturn, purchasing property at a price well below market value. Moreover, I was able to have insight during COVID. I knew how to buy products, where to get products when products were scarce. I was able to navigate that sort of crisis very well. And so that's how it is. The next level human doesn't need to depend on anybody, much less elite sources for anything, because they have an internal compass that has the ability to read into things deeper than what's on the surface or what's revealed in the news or revealed in interviews. All of that doesn't matter anymore. So let's look at this. What comes next? Now that we have the stunning 2025 Jake Barber interview, where he revealed the power of psionics technology, it's time for the rest of us to work up. And what I wrote about Maria Orsic in my book has turned out to be, again, a foreshadowing of what's unfolding now. That's the benefit of getting internal knowledge. Maria received transmissions, built a craft, and left. The elite having continued this work in secrecy, using it for their own benefit while suppressing humanity's birthright. Meanwhile, the public, again, trying to figure out, do UFOs even exist? Feeling embarrassed to even talk about it. And then if they're not embarrassed to talk about it, they're like, well, UFOs have nothing to do with me. I have to go to work and pay the bills. I still have to bring my kids to practice. I got to go to the grocery store. I got to really keep myself in check. If I stray from the straight line thinking and keeping up with all of my things, like having an outside thought about UFOs, I could get lost and not be able to handle all my stuff. And that's just the way they like to keep you, stressed and ignorant. Because what if you were to lift your head, think bigger, and find out, oh my gosh, maybe it doesn't have to be this difficult. Maybe me opening up my mind and my abilities is the path to getting everything I want. So if you're still on the bandwagon that believe that people that have experiences with seeing UFOs or saying they have interactions with ET beings, let's say you think that they're maybe not very smart, or maybe they're out of touch with reality, or maybe they have a mental condition, I'm going to invite you to take in the research from Dr. Gary Nolan, who's been working with something called the Invisible College for several years. What's the Invisible College? Well, it's a secret research group funded by high net worth individuals like billionaire Bob Bigelow. And they've been given money to study not only UFOs, but people who've had experiences. Now, Dr. Gary Nolan, now mind you, the pendulum has been over here, right? It's been, you're stupid, you're out of touch, you have a mental condition, you're ignorant. If you talk about UFOs or you speak of interaction with UFOs, or let's say you've been abducted by UFOs, the pendulum's over here with this. Don't talk about it. Keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, you're going to be ostracized. Well, now we've got the pendulum swinging all the way over here with Dr. Gary Nolan. And he says this. He is, number one, well, he is a Stanford professor. He's an inventor and he's a businessman. He's very wealthy for the inventions he's made. And he has revealed that UFO experiencers belong to maybe an emerging elite class of people due to their neurological enhancements that allow them to process reality differently from the average human. In other words, the next level human will have advanced abilities well above the average human. And they're able to see and hear non-human intelligence and their advanced craft. What does that mean for you and your future if you can't see these entities? Here you thought you were feeling pretty good about, well, thank God I'm not part of that group that's had to be, identified with those nuts that see UFOs or maybe even abducted. And now what they're saying is, if you haven't seen it, you're not part of the new future. you are going to be left behind in ignorance, right? Because you don't see reality in the same way. So I see craft, I take pictures of them, I've had experiences with them, and I have telepathic communication with non-human entities, higher level beings. Does that make me better than you if you don't, as Dr. Nolan suggests? And he says, guess what? I can test for this genetic ability. And he's quite proud because he does have this genetic trait that he says might be an enhanced ability. Does that make him better than those who can't? And in the future, instead of testing people with SAT scores, are they going to be testing people for this genetic ability and separate them out and allow them into different things? So you see the pendulum has swung from one extreme untruth that everybody got behind, and now they're trying to pull people to another truth, to get untruth, to get behind. You got to see where people are BSing you with their own need to pull you into their information, their paradigm, their belief system. Now, we've established and talked about a lot of things. Now that we have confirmed that psionics really is true, we've got historical data, we've got physical proof, we've got qualified people that have engaged with it. Now, unfortunately, we're in a position where we have to go back in time and look at all the things that have been denied or ignored or buried in terms of claims and just dismissed, because this is going to completely shatter our belief about what's going on. And in particular, with Jake Sparber's testimony and his insistence on bringing this forward in the next 12 months, I want you to prepare yourself, because it requires us to go back to information revealed back in the early 2000s, where we had a gentleman named Gary McKinnon who hacked in to military files, and he revealed from those military files, NASA files, DoD files, that there is non-terrestrial soldiers that are taken off planet to do military work. And they have fleet to fleet transfers of these soldiers, meaning in space somewhere, these soldiers are taken from one fleet to another as they do transfers from to planet Earth, off planet Earth, right? So if psionics has been kept secret and now is being revealed, it stands to reason that this secret space program that Gary McKinnon had revealed back in the early 2000s probably is also real. And if soldiers have been working off planet, where have they been going? Are they on the moon? Are they on the Mars? Are they on another solar system? Because if a craft can move at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour, or even bilocate, as quantum physics suggests, I ask you, what the hell is going on? Now, Jake Barber, he has thrown down the gauntlet. He's vowed to make full disclosure a reality within the next 12 months. He is getting venture capital money to figure out a return on investment on this whole thing. We're going to turn it into capitalism. But the question is, because it all comes down to you, Do you have the ability to listen to this material, tune into yourself, and say, how can I benefit from this? Psionics, consciousness is the universe's currency. How much do you have in your bank account? The natural human is abundant and ever producing. Where are you at in all of this? Now, what I've given you so far is just a lot of information, and it might be overwhelming. And there might be some things that you do know, some things that you may not. But what I know for sure is that the details of this concept of psionics unfold. What will emerge along with it will send people into a tailspin of confusion, as their concept of reality will be completely turned upside down. What I can guarantee you is going to happen is that the pendulum is going to swing from one extreme untruth to more dramatic untruths. So started out with nothing, like mum's the word. If you say anything, you'll be killed. You'll lose your job. You'll be put in a mental institution. All these things happened to people that were trying to reveal information or share their experiences. The other side is what we're experiencing now, which is everything coming out and being completely deluged in a flood of information overload where everything is true, right? Your toe is your hand, and the ceiling is the floor, is what's going to happen. It's like everything is going to be tipped upside down. All kinds of flood of information will be sent into the airwaves. And because of that, people will just be reaching for somebody to tell them what's the true truth. They'll be looking outside of themselves for some kind of anchor, some kind of touchstone to grab them and say, don't worry, I got you. Follow me. I am your new guide, right? But that's the old way. That is the old way. But what this podcast is about is not telling you what the truth is. It's not what it's about. It's about giving you the tools to discern for yourself and to cultivate that deep-seated vein of wealth within you. And it's about the fundamentals. As a mom of kids that have been in sports, you find a couple of things. When they're young, they start out with really good fundamentals. Fundamentals in football, fundamentals in track, fundamentals in band. You got your fundamentals and you get them down good and you understand them. You internalize the fundamentals. You get out on the playing field and you try to start doing something fancy, right? You do a fancy play, maybe a couple of trick plays. Track, you might try to fake somebody out and, run up on them and slow down. And you do a lot of trick plays. But when all hell breaks loose, here's what the coach tells you. Coach says, let's stop all the crap. Let's get down back to our fundamentals, get down to what's really important, figure out what we want to accomplish, and we go hard at it. We focus and we go hard. But I'll tell you what, very few people, when it comes to the laws of your being, the laws of the universe, very few people have been taught the fundamentals of how consciousness works. And even if they've read about them, they're not in the daily practice of study, application, and reflection on a regular basis. And without this foundation, when massive paradigm shifts occur, like they are right now, People get lost and confused. And what we've seen historically, really bad things happen. Usually lives are lost. And here's what I've learned from both high-level intuitive work and focusing on my own fundamentals. And I'll tell you what, that 10 years from 2012 to 2022, I wasn't on podcasts. I wasn't telling everybody about my story. I wasn't interested in the phenomena of what happened in 2012. I focused on what I heard, which was you got to develop yourself. You got to get strong within yourself. And when you do that, you prove yourself to be worthy of more, will give you more. And more I got in 2012. And to be honest, there's forces out there that didn't want me to have this information, and they conveyed it to me in a very strong way. Sometimes it comes from the people that you love the most. But here's what I can tell you. Number one, and this is just scratching the surface, everything in the universe is mental. If you can think it, it already exists. Everything that has existed, exists now, or ever will exist is ever present everywhere at all times. All you need to do is get caught up to it to reveal it to you. You simply cannot create outside of yourself. So anything that you hear and it sounds like crazy, I can tell you, it already exists. You can't create outside yourself. However, doesn't mean you need to identify with it. Number one. Number two, a strong intuitive foundation will guide you where you need to go. How many people have done inner work on study of themselves? I know very high profile people that are very effective in this paradigm that we have right now. They will get up at 4:30 in the morning. They'll exercise. They'll be the first one to take in all of the news. They'll do all the research on the stock market. They'll know exactly what they should eat for breakfast. And they do very well in this paradigm. But you know what? They don't have the skill set to move with the new paradigm. And those people are most at risk for crisis. They don't have a strong intuitive foundation. They have a strong, I live in this 3D environment with these rules foundation. That's all they've studied. But it doesn't have to be that way. Number three, you need a clear direction, a true north to navigate disclosure, paradigm shift, whatever, without losing yourself within it. Because the reality is, the sequestering and the unveiling of hidden knowledge are just two sides of the same coin. And if you don't have the right skills to move through it, you get lost in the chaos. So, what's next? Number one, subscribe to this channel. Please sign up for my newsletter on my website, which I'll provide down below. And in the next video, we're going to go a little bit further into giving you the tools that you need to do well in this situation. Again, I could not have provided this information before this time. And this is the perfect time to let you know because we're moving into a way different world and it's happening very fast. So until next time, stay awake, stay aware, and stay aligned. I'm Paula Davis, and thank you so much.